Today we are sewing a piped and concealed zipped cushion cover together. First of all, you either use prepared piping that you can buy in the shop, or you're cutting 3.5 centimeter strips of fabric. You can overlock it, or if it doesn't fray, you don't need to overlock it. And then you're using a 4 millimeter piping cord, which is a good medium diameter, so it's not too high to sew along, and it's not too fine that you by mistake sew through it if you're sewing the cushion. You're preparing your piping, and it's really important that both sides of the piping are exactly on top of each other. And then you are stitching it with the biggest stitch your sewing machine has, because it's more a tucking stitch, and you don't go too near the piping, because you don't want to see that line again later on when you do it a last time around the cushion. And you're not too far away, because then it's as good as not prepared. So you go somewhere in the middle and prepare the piping, stitch it all the way along, always making sure the two sides are exactly on top of each other. Then you get your concealed zip. A concealed zip goes on when it is open. The next step is you look at your cushion pieces that you have prepared. You look at how long shall the zip be. You're buying your zips not necessarily about the length you need them. You buy them which length is the cheapest. And the 22-inch length tends to be the cheapest because it's a general cushion zip. You can buy it either in the shop, obviously, or you can buy it in job lots on eBay, and you just buy 20-30 zips, 22 inches, and then you can cut them with normal scissors to the inch you require. You start about 1/2 inch in on the bottom row here, and then you go over and you stop about 1/2 inch before the end. Just take normal scissors and cut it. There's a pin here. I put a pin on the bottom of my cushion panel, because when I'm cutting out multiple cushions of the same fabric, it sometimes can be confusing which side is the top and which side is the bottom, and you really don't want to have the cushion on the sofa the wrong way around. So immediately after I have cut out, I put a pin which shows me this is my zip side. Maybe that's helpful for you too when you cut out your cushion panels. So for the moment, the panel goes aside because the zip needs to go onto the piping first. Because in the corner, we really don't want to deal with the zip and the connecting of the piping, we start to sew on the zip a bit further in. You also need to watch where your glider is, as that's really not your friend. You go in with your zipper foot, and you don't go as much left as you could. Again, you go a bit less. So after having prepared the piping, this is now a second round of somewhat tucking the zip in first. So you're going not like, for me, number 6 would be the furthest to the left. So I go about half to position number 3. And then again, you can go on your biggest stitch, which for me is 6 millimeters. On many other machines, it is 4 millimeters. And then you need to hold your concealed zip to the middle of what I call the sausage of the piping strand here, just in the middle. If you go too far over, then later on you can't get near enough to the zip, because your piping cord stops you and you have all that left over. If you don't go near enough, then once you are to the nearest position on the zip, you still have piping left over. So that doesn't look good either. So normally it's if the zip is running directly on top of the piping, you are in the right place. And then you just sew it on wherever it hits, as long as you have your fingers so that you're directing the zip on the top of that piping, on the peak of the piping. And then you just sew it on with your big stitch. You realign as you go. This is not something I would pin on, because it makes you more accurate if you go little by little, like so. And then at the end, you just swerve out and you cut. I always pull my work out and I cut really near, so I have a good beginning thread for the next round, and I don't afterwards need to cut again because that saves you away. So, and then I go on the bottom of the panel, and now we sew this line for the last time. So now we go as left as we can and we sew it in nicely. We already prepare the diagonal cutting in to go around the curve later on, and if you cut diagonal, it just curves better. Also, your preparation line, which is half of the piping here, you can't see it very well because it has been green thread, that can be your stopping line for the diagonal cutting in, so you don't risk having a hole visible afterwards when you sew the piping. So we start again half an inch before the end, like we had looked out earlier on. Then I reduce my stitch to 3.5 for soft furnishings. I make sure I'm on tension 5 because you go through quite a few layers, so you need to increase your tension. Otherwise, the thread hasn't got enough pulling power to go through all those layers. Then you don't do like me and lose your thread. I just quickly have to rethread that. Here we are. So, and then you go nearest to the piping, and as I said, you reduce your stitch to 3.5 millimeters. You go past the glider as good as you can. You make sure you know where the glider here is because you don't want the needle to hit it. So, and then you make sure you line up the piping exactly to the edge. And then you go as near to the piping as you can in the hope that afterwards there's not so much zip left over. So this is pretty good. And you realign as you go as near as you can to the piping so that afterwards you can see the piping is nice and tight. There is no floppy piping here, and there is still a bit zip left over, but that's okay for soft furnishings because that's all so stiff now here. The glider would otherwise not actually pass very well. So this is not to be confused with a concealed zip that goes into a dress. That's very different. So you align, you work always to the end of the sewing machine. You don't care what happens below. And then you use your fingers to push from this side and to hold from this side. And then you have it under control. And obviously you need to stay not too near to the needle because with a zipper foot, the needle can get you. And then you come here to the end. And again, you swerve out. You will find out later on why I do that. So then you cut your diagonals here. Let me chew that a bit in. So now we need to attach the other side of the cushion. I'm just looking for my pin. My pin is here. See, then I know I'm near the zip here. And then I attach this side of the cushion. So now we obviously need to sew this side of the zip on. So we need to make sure these two pieces, they line up really nicely on top of each other. Otherwise it's really awkward and it might change your final size of the cushion. So, and then we put the zip exactly in the same position as on this side. We hold it and we come round. Yes, if you want to put a strategic pin in here that you don't lose your foot until you're in, then you can obviously do that. So again, before we start sewing, we put the needle down, and first of all, that doesn't steal us the thread like earlier on, and second, it also doesn't cause us the bird nest underneath. So at the moment, I'm sticking in the zip wherever it hits, but it needs to line up to the edges very nicely. Let's do that. My machine has got a button that I have just pressed, so the needle goes down when I lift the foot from the presser, from the gas pedal. If your machine has that too, then use it. It's quite helpful because then it doesn't move. And again, you swerve out. So now on the second run, we want to get really near to the zip. That's our final run. So what happens here? Concealed zips need to be opened up, and you see that here is a line that is not visible if the zip is like this. But if you open it, you see that funny different weave here, and you need to stitch in that weave. But by soft furnishings, I propose to you, you stitch exactly where the fabric weave changes, because if you go too near, then the glider won't pass, because the back is much, much stiffer than a dress would be, for example. So we go in, again, we put our needle down, and then I'm not back stitching at the moment because later on we go behind the zip to close it. So I don't necessarily need to backstitch just now because we will visit that area again later. So in my machine, my zipper foot has that edge here. So if I'm turning it a bit diagonal, it helps me to get really near. So I can just send it down like this. You need to find out how your machine ticks. In every machine, the zipper foot is slightly different. And then again, you're swerving out. So that's the zipper in now. And then you close it about half. Please do not be tempted to close it anymore, because remember we cut it at the end. So you would use your gliders, your glider. Then we get rid of these two pins. And now you see a bit, but once it's sitting, it will disappear. And if we would go much nearer, we could, but then the glider wouldn't pass anymore. So it's still much prettier than if you had a normal zip where you would see all the teeth. I could have taken a gray or something. In hindsight, I maybe should have taken a light gray, then it wouldn't stick out so ivory. I admit that. So maybe for the next cushion, I will take a gray zip. So now we need to close behind the zip. So we tidy up as we go. So now here we have prepared our diagonal cutting, and we have our zip. And earlier on, remember, I swerved out because now we need to get behind the piping and before the zip. Both legs of the zip need to be on this side, and the piping needs to be on this side. That's where you dig in your fingers. This is the awkward bit. It's a bit awkward, I admit that. And there you need to stitch in. So you need to hit with your needle directly in between the piping and the two ends of the zip, right? I'll show you in a minute what happens there. So first of all, you go back and forth a few times, because obviously when you push the filler in, that will be the two vulnerable sides, either side, where it could pop on you, and that we don't want. And then you lay out your first curve. You make sure that the piping is always on the edge of the cushion panel. If you do like this, you will get a roundy cushion. You won't get nice corners. You really need to push it in, that you come in like that. And I do that with pushing my pointer finger into the curve, right? So for me, now in this moment, I also need to put my tag in. So let's put that in. Here we are. And then we close it. So once this looks nice, you close the lid, and then you feel your way around it. So see where my fingers are. My fingers hold it all. And then I'm guiding it with changing my fingers all the way around to here. And now I stop for a moment to show you what I have done, that you understand what happened there. So what happened there is that we have made a nice zip closure. See? The glider can then go here and close the zip, and then the cushion is shut here behind and goes nicely around the curve. Here you go. That will look better once we've done it properly. So, and now we quickly do the rest of the cushion. So we go back in. And again, you won't see a pin because you don't need a pin. The needle is your best pin. And that's why I always put the needle down with my hand wheel, so the needle can help me. I can pull here, because when you make cushions, you use 100 stroke 16 or at least a 90 stroke 14 needle. Anything finer than that will pop on you when you deal with too many layers and too much fabric at once. So all three elements need to be exactly on top of each other. And then you hold it all, and as always, you just work to the end of the sewing machine, to here. That doesn't interest you. You work to here. That's all what interests you. You have it nicely on top of each other. You hold it, you hold here, and you sew. And you push it against, that you come really near to the piping. Okay. So let's go further. And then we look a bit. Yes, we are still good. If it was a bit like that, then we need to start now pulling the lower one, that we come to the same point at the curve. So every now and then you need to check that if the fabric was traveling on you. So here we go. And you feel where the piping is. That's not very well seen in the video, but you can feel here where your piping is. So, and then prepare quite early, like already there. Prepare for this curve. So you need to start a bit before the corner and a bit to after the corner, just diagonal, so it goes nicely round for you then. So come further down. So now we prepare the next corner. Here you go. Poke your finger in like before. Make sure you really nicely, rather too much than too little, really nicely in there, like so. Put the lid on like before, and then you get your other 5 hands out, that you really hold it nicely, and then you find your way around the corner. See, there is a bit of pushing and forcing involved, but then you're around the corner. So good. And then you continue. You might wonder why this is so thick. So this is upholstery fabric. A sofa has been made by that. And the customer now would like to have some more cushions made. That's why it's fire retardant backed. So again, oops, here we are 5 millimeter less. You see that? So there we need to do a little bit of pulling, that we are not too far out. So when we sew now, we have the bottom loose, and here we just pull a little bit, so that then by the time we're here, we are okay, we are nearly there. That's just sometimes happens. Again, we cut it in, we prepare our curve nicely deep in, lay it out, put the lid on, and then get all our fingers out to help us to get around that curve. Obviously later on we can sew the curve again, because it's on the inside, so you can correct it as often as you want. It's never to be seen from the outside. So, and then here we know we come back, so this is our back, and then we know that with this side we will sew a bit up. So with this side now we come to about there, and then we stop. So let's just go beyond here, and then we stop. There. Okay. Now we need to sort that corner out. So we just turn our work over, and then we do on this side exactly what we have done on the other side of the zip. We tidy a bit up all our frizzy threads here, and then we push out the zip and we clear the piping of the zip. So the zip goes out this way and my fingernails go in between the piping and the zip, like so. And then again we dig in between the piping and the zip. Oh, and I see there's a bit of a lip. That's because the fabric is backed and then it gets very sticky. So you see this is a bit longer than this. So we just need to cheat a little bit and go very near to the seam allowance here. And then by the time we're here, we are back. You don't see that once the cushion is filled. That's a bit of a cheat, but sometimes needs must. And then you put it on top. You can already then push it a bit back in to make the overlap a little bit less. So again, back and forth a few times to stabilize that corner. And then you come around that piping to here. And then we realign it again. So we go to here, push that a bit back, that we go back to where we should be, like so. We come up and we stop here. Now we need to reconnect the piping. So in the olden days, cushions often had the piping coming out here behind the zip, and then the piping came down from this side and it just got exited in that corner, overlapped and exited. It doesn't look that bad, but obviously I want to show you how it's nicely done. So what you do now is you see this is this side and that's how it came from that corner. So now you need to overlap it by, say, 1 inch. So you overlap it by 1 inch and you cut. Here, that's your overlap. And that overlap, when you connect it, needs to be equally distributed left and right. So an overlap of 1 inch makes a 1/2 inch seam allowance to either side. That's sometimes a bit hard to comprehend. And you see, I'm just ripping that a bit open. That's why you're using a bigger stitch length, 3.5 on soft furnishings. So you don't have to unpick. You can just rip it open if you have stable enough fabrics that you're dealing with. And that's the one benefit of these backed fabrics. You can rip them. So now you bring it up with a bit of room. You bring it up. And as I said, the overlap was 1 inch. So you're distributing this overlap into a 1/2 inch seam allowance either side. And that then together makes you again that inch overlap. So lay them in. We just need to get it nice and straight because you see if it's not straight. So, and now we stitch it. So yes, I have ivory thread, but you shouldn't really see it. If the tension is right, you shouldn't really see. And I go over it a few more times, so I really don't see the thread. So my back here is here, but often the back here is here on the side, so you just see where your back here is. See, and now I'm nice and flat, and as I promised, we don't see the ivory stitch at all. You only would see the color of the thread if the tension is too loose. So, and now we have the cord overlaid. So you do not want to cut the cord so that one goes to here and the other one stops here, because if the cushion moves, you might end up with a hole there, with a gap where there's no piping. So what you want to do is, you want to cut both to half, like so. So there's still piping everywhere, but it's not so bulky anymore, okay? So, and then we go on this side, because that seems to be the shorter side of the two. Put it all in nicely, that we don't end up with empty piping. Pull a bit, that it's nice and flat. Go back onto where the stitching was. Go down with our needle. Lever is down. So we go back and forth a bit to re-establish our stitch. And then we see, we can feel here if everything is in order. Here is the piping. And then we sew all the way down here and we close the stitch. So that's our cushion cover done. So I show you how to now. You will see that I never ever snip the corners. I really don't agree with all those tutorials that tell you to diagonally snip the corner. I really don't agree, because if you fold this over and then you fold this over, because it's backed, it's nearly not possible. So the idea is, if you fold this nice and flat over and then you fold this seam allowance nice and flat over, you get a nice sharp corner rather. And if we bring that to the outside, then you will see, if you get your fingernails in to pull, then you have not only got a nice corner, you also have got a full corner. So you would have snipped that seam allowance away, so you wouldn't have had a full corner. And cushion fillers, they reach to here, but they never reach the outer corners. They just can't do that, because in the cushion filler, the corners are always empty. So if you prepare a nice full corner with your seam allowances, you never have a saggy corner. Look how stiff that is. I can't even push it in. So therefore, I'm a big advocate of leave the seam allowances alone in the corner of a cushion. So push that over. So you do need a bit of power, and you will now understand why I don't have any nicely decorated fingernails, because that would last me half a day. And then we pull everywhere, and you need to really dig your fingernails in here. You might be able to use pliers, just gentle pliers, if your fingernails can't do it, to get this out nicely. So if you feel that you still see too much piping, which with me is not the case because I've just done so many cushions, you can always go over the corner again. So see here, that was your corner. So we could now happily just go back in, down with your needle, and just quickly try to push that corner just a little bit more, just on the corners. So you can see it in the light here a little bit. That was our first stitching, and that's our second stitching. So that you can always do as a correction, and then we try that again with the folding. Oofed here, and then yes, okay, it's a bit tighter. So if that pleases you, it's a little bit tighter. So that's how you can correct your corners. And then we put that out. So now you see, once we have that properly folded and folded, then also behind the zip, see, I'm not a big fan of pushing in with the scissors. If you do that, you need to be so careful. That wouldn't be the first time that the scissor pops out here next to the piping. So if you push with something really, really blunt, if you please could. So, and now, as the last thing before we're finished, I show you how that zip closes. Here you go. So that's your zip, nicely closed either side. That's when we went behind, between the piping and the zip. And then on this side as well, the glider just arrives here. And then our cushion is complete. Thank you very much for watching. You tell me. Go. Right, so now I just show you as well how to fill your cushion. So first, this is the fiber filling. That's how they come out the back. Just a bit kind of clumpy. So you fold it into half. You go in. And then, first of all, you really want them in the corners. So what I'm doing is, I have the corner in my hand, and I'm really pushing in the corner. See, really pushing in there. And I do the same over here, and I really push in the corner, and then you push into these corners, and then the filler is in. You close the zip, and then what you need to do, and careful, that's gonna make some noise, don't be surprised, you need to bang it a few times on the table, because that spreads the fiber. That spreads the fiber, and then you box in a few times like this from the sides, and then you have a nice cushion. Thanks for watching.